The Nikon AF-S 7300mm f4.5 5.6G EDVR was a mid-level mid-telephoto zoom lens introduced in 2006 by Nikon for its G lineup, with a built-in autofocus motor and a G aperture lever. Part of a duo of lenses offering the mid-telephoto zoom lineup, it has been succeeded by near AFP-E lenses with an electromagnetic aperture, despite still being popular on the used market. At 78 by 145mm of 745 grams of mostly plastics, the first thing we notice on the Nikon AF-S 7300mm G is the sober design, a true professional lens despite the so-so usability and plastic design, a questionable piece on Nikon's lineup. You see, the lack of an L series from Nikon really shows its limitations here, and true professionals simply don't get a top-of-the-line 7300mm zoom from Nikon, a weird decision given the flexibility and capabilities of these lenses. So on our hands you get a load of plastics that feels cheap and not so smooth to use, with a large hard-to-the-touch zoom ring, a plastic-on-plastic rear manual focusing ring, and a good, albeit small, focusing distance window. The zoom ring is a good example of the weird ergonomics. Large and rubberized is still tough on your hands and harder to use. Sometimes I had to turn the camera instead of the lens in order to provide it with enough torque to engage the mechanism, and it's hard to recommend it for everyone. It is simply not that easy to use. The same can be said about the focusing ring, that is not well damped and feels imprecise. It's clearly a second thought on this AF lens, and again, hard to recommend for those looking for precision. Inside, Nikon adds its excellent SWM motor, capable of silently and quickly driving the rear focusing group in position, also allowing for a good AFC performance. Here tested on the D750 during a marathon, I've got no images out of focus, and the performance aimed at pros despite its low lens costs. The AF usability is also much better than Canon's contemporary 7300 lens that had a frontal focusing group that rotated the filter thread and a focusing ring not supporting the full-time manual, both fixed on the newer and awesome Nano USM Mark II lens, and also fixed on this better Nikon, at least at the time. And also inside, Nikon adds its 4-stops VR module that is noisy and not so smooth, actually rated at just 2 stopped by CIPA ratings, requiring the camera to be level at the eyes in order to detect the correct orientation. While it does offer an interesting active mode, made to compensate for larger movements made to the photographer, like from a rocking boat or safari car, this VR module is not the most reliable. I'd recommend double checking your images if you're dependent on the VR performance. And that's it. At the front, the 67mm filter thread is smaller than usual, despite fixing on a good, thick plastic thread that fixes inside the supplied-in-the-box lens hood. At the rear, the metal mount features a rubber gasket, despite nothing being declared about a proper weather sealing, and is also not compatible with teleconverters. Overall, what we get from Nikon's prior mid-level lineup was a good set of features for a reasonable price, despite not being the best in hands. So it was surpassed by a simpler AFP-E lens that still isn't the proper professional lineup one would expect, not from such an important focal length. But can it deliver its images? Let's take a look. With a fairly complex 17 elements in 12 groups optical formula, sporting good 2 ED pieces to enhance resolution and deal with chromatic aberrations, and Nikon's super integrated coatings, what the AF-S 7300mm f4.5 5.6 G zoom delivers optically is fair, perfect for most shots, despite the usual aberrations and distortions. Wide open, this lens behaves just like a mid-level product. The resolution drops the farther we get from the center frame, enhancing in clarity and vignetting as we stop it down, reaching near perfection at f11. This is a good performance to simply work with these files, despite the lack of a proper professional option in optics and price, and this lens will have the get the job done feeling from 70 to 300mm. The typical aberrations are the geometry and axial chromatic aberrations that also impact the bokeh quality and shallow depth of field images. That signature poor man's optics, with plenty of color blobs around highlight edges. That's the biggest hit we get from the image quality of this lens. The images work, yes, but they clearly lack in colors, contrast, and overall look, compared to obviously more expensive peers, including Canon's top 7300L series and lower-cost f4 300mm primes, better suited for the longer focal length. So the recommendation is clear for this mid-lens: mid-level price, mid-level build, mid-level images. They do work for the everyday photographer, and I did get good images with it. But do realize there are better alternatives out there, provided you have the coin. For all other photographers, just have fun with this long focal length and nice shooting.